Hi, everyone. Welcome to the April 2021 edition of the Queer Culture Club, hosted by the GLBT Historical Society. My name is Terry Beswick, and I'm the Executive Director of the Historical Society and your host for tonight's edition of the Queer Culture Club. And so tonight I'm thrilled to be chatting with director, producer, screenwriter, and playwright Joe Castel, whose body of work explores Latinx and LGBTQ history and identity. We'll talk about Castel's newest documentary, Nelly Queen, The Life and Times of Jose Sarria, which came out in 2020. And we'll be airing the film immediately following this event, and we'll post a link here so that you can check it out on YouTube. So Queer Culture Club is a monthly series broadcast live on each second Thursday that focuses on LGBTQ people who are defining the queer culture of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And so Joe, I'm going to bring Joe on, but Joe Castel, him, is a producer, screenwriter, and playwright whose work has explored Latino and LGBTQ history and identity for over 20 years. His documentary, Nelly Queen, The Life and Times of Jose Sarria, opened the Long Beach Q Film Festival in 2019 and won the Audience Award for Best Feature Film. Since then, it has streamed at Los Angeles Outfest, Fresno's Real Pride, and the Winnipeg Film Festival. Castel's other film and theater credits include RECORDAR, a documentary about his family's immigration from Mexico to Illinois, the play Boulevard, which received critical recognition in its 6-week run in West Hollywood, and the feature-length screenplay Hero Street, which relates the true story of 8 Mexican-American war heroes and was awarded the Corporation for Public Broadcasting Development Grant. So Joe, come on.
You caught me itching my nose.
How are you? It's been so good to meet you and get to know you a little bit as we prepare for this. And and I'm excited. We're going to actually end our discussion here with a brief trailer that will give people a sneak preview at tonight's film, which I had the pleasure of watching just a few days ago, actually. And so, and I was just really thrilled to see this film depicting this, hero in our community, and especially somebody that we love at the Historical Society, because we hold one of the, well, really, I think probably the largest collection of papers related to Jose Sarria. So maybe you could just talk to me a little bit about, the making of the film, why you made it, how you made it, how did you fund it, and how long has this process taken?
Well, it's only been in process of 23 years.
Right.
I read about Jose in 1990 when I was a grad student back in the University of Iowa. And it was for a class, and I couldn't believe there was such a courageous person that existed back in the 1950s and 60s. The passage in the book said that he would stand up in this cafe on a makeshift stage on tables and sing and perform in drag. He would do opera parodies of Carmen, Aida, and actually that's behind me as Aida in this painting that he owned. And when the Vice Squad, so it's basically frequented by gay and lesbian men and women, and the Vice Squad would come in and they would try to entrap the men. And Jose knew there was a law that if someone asked if you were a vice officer, they had to acknowledge it and say yes. And so Jose knew this because he had been entrapped himself. So he didn't want any of his patrons to get arrested and ruin their careers like it did for him, because he wanted to be a teacher. And so he would confront them. And I just could not believe that such a person would do this back in the 50s. He was in drag, he was a Latino. I'm surprised they didn't put him in an insane asylum, give him shock therapy, put him in prison, or even kill him.
Which I think it's important to note happened to many, many people.
Yeah,
back at that
many
time.
people.
So, yeah.
That I didn't even know that, and I had to find that out myself. So your family could put you in an insane asylum and have you go shock therapy, or even get a lobotomy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
So, and Jose knew people like that. And so he knew what was happening to the community. And I said, wow, what happened in this man's life that he made him do this? I had to meet this person. This is 1990. There was no internet, no Wikipedia. So I had no idea if he was even alive.
Mm-hmm.
It was the height of the AIDS crisis. So here I am in Iowa, University of Iowa. And so when I moved to California that year, I moved to Los Angeles. I looked up and went to the library and looked him up in the San Francisco phone book
Mm-hmm.
and got his address. He had just moved there. He had actually been living in Arizona and just moved back. And I told him I wanted to meet him, write about him, maybe do a feature film about him. And he was very excited. So he invited me and I came up. And he had so many great stories. It was very magical because it was like, he led a very simple life. He worked in a print shop. He made copies. But on the weekends, he would do cabarets and do performances and sing. And he was like a celebrity. People just loved him, revered him. And it was kind of a very magical time. And so I thought, why hasn't anyone written about this man, done a film about him, a documentary on him, a play at least? And so I bought a camera and I just started recording him. It was very informal, very just sitting around the table because he got very nervous. He had a lot of pain in his life. People didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't like to share. And so he was very careful. So you just had to peel him back like an onion a little bit. And so we just got very comfortable. And I said, and then it was a 23-year process from 1992 to 2013 when he died. And that's how long I've been documenting him.
So it's really going back to that first letter of interest, that blind inquiry letter that you sent to him, where you began thinking. That's where you began thinking about this film to now, right? So yeah. So obviously it wasn't a solo project. You couldn't do it by yourself. What kind of funding were you able to get to make this happen?
Well, the first thing I would tell any filmmaker, anyone who would document something, is to get a fiscal sponsor. Because it's very difficult to be a nonprofit yourself. You can be a production company, but that's totally different than from being a nonprofit. And for corporations and foundations and even individuals to give money, they want a tax write-off, and they're not going to give it to you. And just a production company, foundations, and other nonprofits can't give you money. So they funnel it through another nonprofit, and that's From the Heart Productions, which is my fiscal sponsor. And through them, I was able to, from that led to the imperial courts and the international court system that oversees all the courts. There's 70 courts in the country that Jose started back in 1965. So many of the courts gave money from New York to Canada. Many courts gave. So
that's wonderful. So the court system, because the court system is, of course, raised, as the film describes, millions of dollars for a variety of causes. But they all revved up and raised some money to underwrite the production.
Yeah, it was about 2/3 of the money. It was about $150,000 total.
Okay. Yeah.
For the film, and they raised about 2/3. But like the Jose Sarria Foundation and other foundations, friends, of donors, we had a Kickstarter, So,
but this is
Jose's people and the estate, all of his furniture, all his jewelry, all his paintings, and many of his mementos, antiques. After he died, he just said, sell it, give it to charity, give it to a nonprofit, and he didn't specify. So once they had liquidated, the estate had liquidated, they said, well, we'll give you the money because you're making this film about him. You're going to keep his legacy going. Yeah. So that's pretty much.
That's an amazing story. And but this is a project of passion for you, obviously. And, from the beginning, your interest in your discovery of Jose Sarria's story, and you threw yourself into it. And, I thought it was very interesting that you described that relationship that developed over time, and you talk about your interest in Jose, particularly in, some documentaries will be, you don't even know who the filmmaker is. They're not part of the story. And so I'm just wondering, can you talk about your decision to describe that relationship as part of the story?
Yeah, so I narrate the film, and you hear my voice. So you don't actually see me. I'm not in the film.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's maybe one scene where I'm interviewing him on camera, but it's kind of considered the cardinal sin to put yourself in the documentary. It's a big no-no. It's a big red flag. They're just like, oh, you just don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's bias. You know, then you become biased. You know, right? And we had done some previews, and everyone kept saying you should get a celebrity to narrate, or some people were saying that, I should say.
Yeah.
You should get a celebrity to narrate it, and you know, and have your voice totally taken out. But the way I conducted the interviews is that sometimes we'd be arguing on camera, you know, back and forth, and laughing and joking, and the audience, we found out, loved that, and the consensus was that I should continue with my narration, not get a celebrity narrator, just for distribution, and keep myself as the kind of the thread line to the story, because I did develop it sort of like a feature film where there's a turning point, there's a climax at the end, and I'm kind of, you know, as we go through his trials and tribulations, there's arcs for his character, and so I kind of help reveal that where there's maybe he couldn't or didn't.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think you do just a really beautiful job of showing us, you know, who he was, and you know what his passions were, his loves, you know, and in particular the love of his life, and you know how that story unfolded, which is, you know, just really touching. But you know, in talking about Jose Sarria's contributions to LGBT culture and to society more broadly, I think that's often what people think of if they know about Jose. You know, that he was the first to run for public office as an LGBTQ candidate, open LGBTQ candidate anywhere in the world, in running for the supervisors in San Francisco, and also, of course, was founded the Imperial Court. And so you hit all those major points and milestones, but you also, you know, talk about why he did them. You know, what was his motivation, and I felt like that's sort of like the through line for the whole film for me, is sort of explaining or showing us why. And in particular, with the founding of the Imperial Court, becoming naming himself the first Empress, and the Widow Norton, which is, you know, so wonderful and such a great San Francisco story. But he seems to be enjoying exploding, you know, society's expectations of what it means to be, you know, a man, in particular a Latino man, and he does that through theater and pageantry. Do you agree? You know, is that what you're trying to tell us about, you know, why he does many of the things that he does through his art and theater?
Yeah, I mean, he was really political theater. I mean, he enjoyed kicking over the apple cart because he did see hypocrisies in society. Mm-hmm. He was sort of like the jester, the court jester on stage. He would poke fun at people who were trying to be straight, even you know they were gay, and he would expose them just as well. I think that was part of his style. You know, parody was his style, satire. But it was also just a part of who he was. You know, he was very, very gender fluid before there was a term for that. You know, people say at those times they would say cross-dresser. I would say he was just gender fluid because he just felt very comfortable in both male, female attributes. You could pick up a hammer as easy as a lipstick holder, you know? He saw being just one gender wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. He wanted to enjoy both.
Or all of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, his mother did dress him as a girl when he was a baby, but when he turned 15, he wanted to go out as a female. To public dances, mm-hmm. and you know, you would think the mother would be like, you know, terrified, or you know, just what the hell, you know. But she escorted him there, and he told me that, you know, he would always get kicked out. And I said, oh, because they discovered that you were a boy, right? Mm-hmm. No, because all the boys fought over me. He was passing you know, but he was just being a big puta, you know, and so he would just get him and his mother would have to leave, you know, and sneak in the next time.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, he was always, you know, pushing that envelope, but I not always to make a statement, but that he just wanted to show that he was a fusion of
Mm-hmm.
both spirits, a female. You know, it's very Native American, you know, the Bardash of having both spiritual qualities of the male and female attributes. So to me, that's who he was. I never seen anyone who was so comfortable. He was just so fluid.
Right.
He'd carry a purse. Sometimes he'd make me carry the purse, but he would carry a purse even, you know, in his 80s. He'd be dressed like a man, but carried a purse.
Right. Yeah, and it's wonderful. I mean, you can always see that little, you know, the little smile and little wink as he's performing or just speaking, you know, from the stage, or even just interpersonally. I think that, you know, that there's always a sense of irony or about or self-awareness about, you know, how he's conveying, you know, his message, but he also was like super political. I mean, you know, the way that he began and what was the line he used when he ended his performances?
United we stand, divided they'll catch us one by one.
Yes, I love that. I mean, that's so beautiful.
On the Tombstone.
Yeah. So, you know, and we mentioned, you know, his run for supervisor in 1961, and which is, you know, I mean, it's hard to, you know, especially I think for us nowadays to think about how, you know, how amazingly courageous that was to run as an openly gay man, not to mention him, somebody who performs in a gender fucking way, you know, and I think. You touched in the film about, you know, the blowback that he got and actually the organized opposition from the Democratic Party just a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Tell us, you know, what happened.
Yeah, when he decided to run, well, they were going to shut down all the gay bars in San Francisco. That was like a promise by the mayor, by the city officials, the ABC, the, you know, police. They're all out to shut down the bar. And Jose thought, well, the only way that he could, you know, for the community to have a voice is to be, you know, an elected official. So when he ran, he called, he registered, but he wanted to register as a Democrat. And so he called the Democratic Party. The city says, I would like to run as a Democrat. And they said, go to hell, you know, like, you know, go to the Republicans. So he called the Republicans. They said, no, you know, go to hell. They go to the Democrats. So he got tired of it. And so he got an attorney and he said, you know, my attorney is going to, you know, start legal procedures if you don't let me list myself as a Democrat. It's against my constitutional rights. And so they let him, but they said, well, we're not going to support you. Well, he said, fine. And there were only 9 people running for 5 seats back then in 1961. There were only 5 seats. And so he had a pretty good chance of winning. Mm-hmm. And he had a very big following. And so the city officials got so scared that they went out and they got 25 more people to run to split the vote. And he probably could have won if they hadn't done that. But yeah, that's pretty much how it was done.
Yeah. So I mean, and in a way, you know, I mean, you touch on this, but you know, he didn't really lose in a sense because, you know, he was the first to do it anywhere, first of all, but second of all, he did show that there was a gay
voting bloc,
and which really kind of like touched off, you know, everyone else's, you know, estimations of their chances of running for forever, right?
Oh yeah, and you know, Robbie Robinson, who's in the film, he's, you know, he says that after that, you know, they came to the gay community. You know, Dianne Feinstein came knocking on their doors. Mm-hmm. It might have been a couple years later, not right away, but they realized that they were starting to get some momentum. And this is still the mid-'60s. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's an amazing story, and, you know, a contribution that I think is often under-recognized. And I think that it really comes across in the film that Jose was very self-aware of his place in history, and especially as he got older and more infirm, it seemed as though he was expressing concern about whether he would be remembered much less, recognized for, his contributions. And so I think your film is really like an important, obviously, way to make sure that he was remembered. And I think a lot more scholarship is due on Jose Sarria, but, why do you think that Jose, his story is not often remembered in the pantheon of, famous LGBTQ figures outside, especially San Francisco?
Well, the simple answer is he wore a dress, basically. And the same can be said for Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, two pioneer activists also that were, have been forgotten. Recently they've just gotten the acknowledgement that they deserve. But Jose they've been trying to do a campaign for California's Hall of Fame. Maria Shriver started, and they've been trying to get him in for several years now, several administrations, I think. And Jerry Brown, from what I've been told, Jerry Brown, the former governor of California, said, but he was a drag queen, and it's like, yeah, and they were the pioneer activists. They were out leading the parade. And I think that's one of the main reasons why he's not acknowledged. Someone says it in the documentary. They don't take drag queens seriously. I mean, it's a sad statement.
Yeah.
That's true. Like, they're just entertainers, right? They're not activists. They're just there for fun.
Right. So, that's such a, one-dimensional way to look at it. Somebody like Jose Sarria, it's really very sad. But, and I just want to say, let's talk, I'd love to activate the Historical Society in that campaign and partner, with the court also in seeing what we can do, legislatively or through influence to, make that happen. I think it's only right that Jose Sarria be included in the California Hall of Fame. So in talking about the courts, and, there's been, there's the 50 Years of Fabulous, of course, Mark Smolowitz's amazing film. And so people are kind of learning about the courts and, their contributions over the last 50 plus years now. So how are the courts involved in particular in keeping Jose's legacy alive? I mean, there's the annual coronations and there's the remembrances, but are there other things going on?
Right now, they're doing a letter campaign to the Postal Service. They would like to get a stamp for Jose and Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, each individuals, to keep his name alive. I mean, to keep remembrance out there. They were actually behind the Harvey Milk stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And so the letter campaign, they helped get Harvey Milk stamps. So they got a lot of pull. And from what I understand, it's very successful. And that's one of the ways that they are keeping. And they have the Jose Sarria Scholarship to LGBTQ students going to college. They do the annual cemetery march after coronation to visit his grave. He wanted to see that happen. But I think basically he wanted people to really understand him. So I've been working with a professor from New Mexico, and we're working on a study guide so we can accompany the film and then, give it to or sell it to colleges and universities and high schools so they can teach it, about today's contributions in school. Classes.
Yeah, that's so wonderful, and I know that Jose Sarria was included on the list of LGBTQ figures that are supposed to be included in the teaching, in schools in California, and I think that's happening elsewhere as well, because he's such an important figure. And I mentioned, that we have the collections of, Jose's papers, which is, many, many linear feet in our archives, which includes, memorabilia and papers and photographs and letters. And we do have in our museum also, which is opening, in the next, several weeks, in the Castro, a small exhibit we've had up for some years about Jose Sarria, and occasionally we'll switch out some things like different costumes and that sort of thing. But it's always been really important for visitors, and one of the popular exhibits that we have. But And I hope it inspires more scholarship, more, as I mentioned before, more books and master's theses or what have you. Are you aware of any other
I was approached by a senior in at the University of Pacific
Okay,
in
University
Stockton.
Pacific. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he had heard that I was doing this film, and I wasn't ready, and so I didn't want to send it to him over the internet. So he drove all the way down with his grandmother to Pasadena from Stockton, and I showed it to them on my laptop, and his grandmother loved it. She just fell in love with it, and so then he invited me up to Stockton, and they paid for my way up, and I showed it to about 100 students and faculty, and they were astounded that this person existed. They had no idea. They were just really floored. Really, they were crying. Some of them were crying at the end. They just cannot believe that this person lived.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know it inspires people to know more about him. There was a PhD student from Oxford who wanted to see the film, and who went to your archives and who was doing research there. And he even found some stuff that I didn't even know about. The FBI was investigating one of Jose's organizations. So yeah, I think it's going to spark a lot of research. People to study him.
Yeah, I think it will, and it's incredible, what the court system has done, creating with the model that he helped to create, and I just love the humor and the anecdotes that come across. That I just really awards and many viewers to carry this story forward. It's so important. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining.
Thank you for the Historical Society. You guys did a lot for me. You gave me a lot of the historical footage of the Super 8s of gays, the gay bars at that time during the late 60s. So that was very instrumental in telling the story. So thank you so much for that.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you, Joe Castel, for joining us. And have a good night, everyone. Get some popcorn. Enjoy the show.
Nelly Queen is a historical film just because of the time it takes place.
It's history. It's history how most, and no offense, but most people that are in their 20s, even 30s, don't realize what was in San Francisco years ago and how it started.
It was about getting people out of jail. It was paying bail. It was trying to get a place at the table so they'd listen to us, and that was the political struggle.
Jose is out in public in drag in the late 40s and early 50s. Not something that a lot of people did. And he did it with support from his family. He did it with support from his employer. And he managed to continue to move the bar forward as he continued to be more visible within the community.
I appreciate the tone of your film so much. He wanted to be a teacher, and something happened, and he was, got arrested because there was this police entrapment, and his career was just not going to go. That was the end of teaching. He began singing and dancing at the Black Cat, and he didn't know, I think, at the time what that was going to turn into, but it became a gathering place and a meeting place for the leadership of the early gay and lesbian community.
And it showed so much. I didn't even know she danced out the tables all the way out the front door her last night at the Black Cat until I saw the film. That was remarkable. She was on top of those tables all the way out the door. Those are the kind of things people don't understand today. That was Jose, and she wanted to make sure her legacy never ended.
That Jose was the first openly gay person to run for political office in the United States blew me away. I thought, what?
He was in unfamiliar territory, but he many times he said, if I didn't do it, who would do it? Nobody else had the balls to do it. He said, but I did.
And this was in the 60s. I thought, well, okay, there's a lot going on in the 60s. I know the man who stood up and did that. It still amazes me that I got to spend some personal time with such a hero.
Jose started the Imperial family because she knew that there was a group of people in the community that were disenfranchised from their families. She started an organization that welcomed each other. She knew that most of us didn't have the support and the love of our families.
The interview with the young man that whose family, beat him to try to keep him from doing drag. The fact that he found out about Jose, and Jose's legacy helped him to continue doing what he wanted to do and be who he wanted to be, I think that's very important for young people.
And your movie is such a wonderful personal record, again, of a man, but of a creative, a powerful, visionary person, really put it together in such an appealing way that you can't leave that film and say, so what? You can't leave the film and say, so what? You have to say, whoa, I want to know more about this man. And I think that we all need to remind ourselves that, are we dreaming big enough? Are we aiming high enough? If he could do what he did against just unbelievable odds, what are we doing that is bold and exciting and daring? People say, we walk on the shoulders of those before us. Well, truly, I walk on Jose's shoulders and hope my heels don't hurt his shoulders sometimes. But what are we doing to have other people walk on our shoulders as the time goes forward? Maybe you just start to think about that as you are in it longer time. I've been doing this for 25, almost 30 years now. I mean, we have so many things we still need to do, and so many rights that are categorically ignored, so many categories that are being hated for no reason at all. We need more understanding, we need empathy, and what are we doing to make that happen? And there was a man that did it back in the 60s and all the way through, and we could be doing it today.
United we stand, or divided they'll catch us one by one. Everybody has the right to run for office. I shall declare a new kingdom. I'll make myself an empress. I thought I was a beautiful girl. I believe I was a good soldier. So I made myself the Widow Norton. I believed in myself. I had no problems believing in myself.
Nelly Queen. And when you think that you got a He-Man.